is William Budge, and I'm an art director and designer, production designer. So I graduated from AFI in 2000 in production design. And then originally my wife, Nicole, and I, we both met at AFI actually in class. We were kind of a team, a production design team. We did that for several years. And then we sort of split off and I became more of an art director and she did concept art. So when we started, I guess in 2000, we kind of had sort of a lot of stuff at one time. Like we were doing a movie in India, and then another sci-fi movie, and then when 9/11 hit, kind of everything shut down, especially going to India and places. So it was kind of an interesting journey, and we've had kind of a long progression. But I've kind of done a lot of independent films. I used to work with Wim Wenders, German director. I worked on Michael Jackson tour one time, which was strange, just strange things. I worked on one of the first things I did was Ocean's 11, but I actually did like the strange CG walkthrough that you see on the monitor that they're talking about the Bellagio, breaking the Bellagio. Just strange things like that. And then the past couple of years, I did a show called 13 Reasons Why as an art director. And then I spent 4 seasons on Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, as a visual effects art director. Sort of basically kind of merging the art department and visual effects together and designing ships and that kind of thing, which was fun. And then I did a new Star Wars show as art director for a year and a half. Ended last January. So I guess it was 2021, 2022. So that's a movie, that's a TV show coming out hopefully in 2024. That was pretty cool. And then I was just in Australia on a project and during the strike, and then basically the strike happened, and I've just been doing odds and ends at this point, but I've kind of had a varied career, you know, just doing different things, a lot of movies. And then around 2014 or so, I started switching more to TV or, you know, long series, you know, for HBO and Netflix. And yeah, it's been great. You know, right now I'm on a show where I'm basically just drawing, and I'm sort of illustration in a sense. Other shows, more art directing and, you know, sort of managing the art department. And it's always a little different. It's kind of, yeah, it's just been an interesting time, interesting. Yeah, I guess in my role, it's always a little different. You know, it's not like if I was the DP, you know, I'd be shooting. And what I'm doing, I'm sort of, sometimes I'm designing, sometimes I'm, you know, on paper, sometimes I'm literally on the set, just trying to manage things, run around. Sometimes I'm out scouting places. Sometimes I'm really just immersed only in the computer, you know, basically in 3D. On the last couple of projects, we've basically been working in Unreal and just literally been flying around in virtual land. So yeah, it's been kind of a different career, and it's been a lot of fun.
Let's kind of start from the beginning for our audience. So what inspired you to ultimately choose the path that you went on?
You know, I was always into art and movies, actually. My dad was really into movies. You know, basically, it sort of kind of dazed me, but once we got a VCR, my dad would watch a movie every day. So I started watching with him, and, you know, I was watching Taxi Driver when I was about 9, you know, stuff like that. And that kind of, you know, inspired me, but I was also super into Star Wars. And it's like always my thing was Star Wars. You know, like when I was a kid, I still have all the figures. I just had everything. That was like my deal. So, you know, I was in high school, I was doing a lot of artwork, and I kind of realized that the designers from Star Wars were industrial designers originally. That was what they studied. So then I went into that field originally, knowing that I would try to get into film afterward. But I got that as a basis for design. And then once I graduated, I just went straight to grad school. I was basically, I just knew I wanted to go right into film school and go right into film versus working in the quote unquote real world. So luckily I got into film school. You know, I had about a year off, I think. Yeah, I did portfolios, and I did, you know, just to do it, I did try out for a couple of jobs in industrial design just to see if I could do it. But I did go right to, after about a year, to film school, and it's been film ever since.
Wow. Okay. What was the process like applying to film school? And
I mean, basically, I spent a lot of time on my portfolio. That was something that I knew I had to do either way for industrial design or for film. So I spent, months. I went home from school, spent a lot of time on my portfolio, and then I think what it was is I didn't even really know AFI at the time because I was I was tempted to go into directing. There was different things I was looking at. So I'd applied to USC, which I got into actually, NYU, and then I found AFI. And I had actually never heard the term production design before, even though, I mean, it's at the beginning of the credits. I just never really thought about it. And when I realized what it was, I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of perfect, because I am a designer, and it sort of melded those things together. And so I applied, and I believe Bob Boyle called me. We talked about it, and yeah, I think that was basically it. I mean, just came right down and started. I mean, obviously a little scared. It was kind of interesting because I had the least experience of most of anybody there, probably, as far as film goes. I mean, not film knowledge, but actually practical film. But in a short amount of time, things kind of smoothed out, and I realized actually my industrial design trainings come in handy, and almost everybody I work with now, funny enough, on Star Wars, Star Trek, and stuff, are former industrial designers.
wow, that's really cool.
Just because of the nature of that, it's sort of like the high level design. So basically, the science fiction aspect of it. It's a lot of people, design cars, design products. So it kind of went full circle in a sense, which was sort of funny.
Yeah,
Because I spent years, working on stuff that was, like a road movie, or I did a period film or something like that, something that the industrial design didn't necessarily fully apply. But now I'm kind of doing these things where robots and cars and that kind of thing.
that's really special. They offered it to you over the phone.
Yeah, we talked on the phone. Yeah.
Wow. So first time in LA.
So I came as a kid, but that was basically the first time. Found an apartment very close to campus. It's like a walk there. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun. It was a little nerve-wracking at first because there were so many projects. I mean, we had to do, I think, 5 boot camps. Boot camps were sort of like short 5-minute shows. And before I even knew what was going on, it was like, okay, you're doing 5 projects. Okay, so I'm just sort of like, because back then, I mean, it still is, but I think it was really a conservatory only. So it wasn't about classes, it was just about actually doing it. So it was like straight up, we did 5 projects, and I think we had 4 cycle projects at the same time. I mean, basically the whole first year was shooting stuff. So it was quite a experience just to catch up, and kind of figure out what's going on. And yeah, it was exciting. At nights I'd go to all of the local retro theaters. We'd see movies at night, and everybody was nice at school. And it was, like I said, I met my wife there with the same class, and our design class was very close knit. Because there's only 7 of us, so within a short amount of time we were all like best friends, and yeah, it was a nice time.
Yeah, and you're all like supporting each other on each other's sets, and
yes, I think that's why it was like that. Is because it's basically just to have every show have a production designer.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
It was.
That's a lot of work.
Second year, I think we were allowed to do kind of what we wanted, because we had a thesis project, and my wife and I, we ended up doing 2. We kind of teamed on 2. I know people that did 2. I know people that did, I think, 3 at the time. It was kind of like whatever you wanted to do. You had to do one, at least one. But the second year was when there was sort of a lack of designers, obviously, for the shows. But yeah, first year, as I recall, we basically just had to do as much as we could.
And I think that's so cool that you actually found your wife at school, and now you're happily married, and
yeah, I mean, later. I mean, we basically were just friends at school, but but we just we basically teamed up, and I guess we grew together that way. But in school, we were just literally partners, and it just came out that essentially it was so hard. There was like a point when like I said, we had to do, I think it might even been 6 projects now I think about it. It was a lot. I remember that cycle projects, it was a lot. And it was just because I just felt I couldn't do what I wanted to do at some point because you had to shortcut everything. So I just thought if we could team up, then at least you have somebody to talk to, number one, but also you can double team everything. And it became a little easier, a little funner. And yeah, definitely second year. And it's ironic because right after we did that, it became kind of a norm in the industry to have 2 designers. Not everything, but you did start to see at that point. I think on the, what's that movie called? The Christmas movie on the train, animated film.
Oh yeah, with Tom Hanks.
Polar Express.
Polar Express, yeah.
That had 2 designers. It was like right after us. It was interesting. And now it's not uncommon to have that. But I just found that it was just so much to do. And I was still learning. I mean, honestly, we were still trying to learn what we're supposed to be doing and how to design. And I just liked having the ability to have a little time to actually sit down on paper and think about it versus just running around like a madman, just trying to get everything done.
Yeah, and then producers coming at you being like, all right, we got to cut your budget, X, Y, and Z, all that fun stuff.
Or coming in during class and come outside quick. I mean, actually, our class, our class went on strike because we didn't really have almost any class at that point. I mean, there was like 1 or 2, so we just threatened to leave at that point.
Wow.
And we ended up getting more classes than anybody else by the end of the year, which was really cool. And so at that point, I was really getting into just the actual classwork, which was exciting.
It's a blessing, though. They really do try to give you everything that they possibly can think of and throw at you, and it's really up to you to navigate it.
No, and I totally understood even their point of view because they kept saying it's a conservatory. It's really about doing, and I totally got that. It's just there are certain things you need to know on a basic level. It's like even drafting. There's like certain basic levels that I mean I knew that stuff, but not necessarily for film. There's just certain things that we all have to catch up on that you kind of need to have classes for. But I totally understood the idea behind just shoot as much as possibly can. I mean, our thesis project actually still comes up as far as like if I interview for jobs, I'll still show photos of it, and that's like the thing people love the most, which is very strange. I mean, it's so long ago, and we didn't have any money, but we just for certain things, we built like this Irish village, and it was a circus, and we did all these things on the beach, and knowing the right angles, it just looks very nice. And to this day, I mean, people, that's what they still like the most.
Why don't you talk a little bit about your thesis project? How was the teaming? What were some of the biggest obstacles that you faced while you're in your thesis?
We did 2. So we did one. It was about the Serbian War, Croatian-Serbian War.
Okay.
And the director was Serbian. Co-writer, director was Serbian. And then, in fact, I was like the only American. Everyone was European, including my wife, or my future wife, who's German. And she had been to Croatia a lot, so that was actually kind of nice because she actually went to Croatia over the summer and just took like lots and lots of photos. So when we came back, and she also took actual set dressing, because we basically we built a house. It takes place in a house. People invaded, and it's kind of a sad, war story. Mm-hmm. But we literally had it with the correct plugs, light switches. Everything was dead on. It just worked out that way. And then we did a thesis project again about this, like it was a period film about a boy in a kind of like a circus in an Irish village. And they both turned out really well. Like I said, the one, people still like the photos from that. I mean, I haven't watched the movie a long time, but they still like the photos of them. And I think they both turned out well. I don't know in the end how much, if anybody even saw them, but people know we did them and they've seen the photos, which is enough. And I think that, but it was great. The teaming, we knew, I guess, the year before what we're going to do. Come how that worked out. I guess we picked at the end of the first year, and then we kind of talked all over summer about it. And then, the second year was either classes or working on one of the other projects. We ended up having on the Croatian thing, I think a relatively small crew. I can't really remember. I think it was kind of small. And then the one about the Irish village, we had like 2 art directors. We probably had 20 or 30 people in the crew.
Whoa.
Yeah, we had a construction team. We had the producer got a guy from who we're still friends with from Germany to come over to build the sets. And we literally built like a house and stuff on the beach. And it was so well built, we couldn't take it down. It was a problem actually because they couldn't even rip it down. It was so strong. But yeah, I mean, we still talk to him, and
Beautiful.
yeah. Trying to think of anything else. That's all I can remember. Sorry.
No, that's awesome. That's really beautiful. And just a side note, what part of Germany is your wife from?
Hamburg.
Hamburg. Oh, right on, right on. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I met my wife at AFI when I went to AFI, but she was a performer in my first cycle film.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and she's from Switzerland, so we just recently spent like 2 months over there.
Nice.
And we go to like Konstanz, and her mom's from Germany, so that's why I was curious. Like, oh, I wonder what part. She's from Bavaria.
Well, my mother-in-law is from Lake Constance.
Lake Constance, yeah, no, right on, so close, right on the border there with Switzerland, and we go there and we go hang out at the sauna. It's really cool.
Nice.
Yeah, but okay, digress. Let's talk about like your first job after you graduate. How did that happen? How were you able to manifest that?
There was kind of a lot of things at one time. We had kind of a strange career, or I did, or both of us together, where we had like a lot of stuff at one time, right after school, and then a huge lull because of 9/11 and a bunch of things happened, and then it kind of picked up again slowly. Like literally right after school, like I said, we ended up doing a film to be shot in India. It was kind of a remake of, what was that movie? Anyway, it was about like 2 spaceships that find each other in space, and there's a murder. It was kind of like a murder thing in spaceships. And so we designed that on paper, and then we hired a crew, and they went to India to start building. We probably would have gone later. At the same time, we ended up meeting Polly Platt, who taught at AFI for a while after us. And she was a famous designer, also producer. Like she produced Say Anything in a lot of movies. She was going to do her first film as a director. And we bumped into her at a party, talked to her, and she told us the story. And we ended up doing some drawings for her, and she loved them. And then, so she basically hired us to design that movie. But again, both films at the same time fell because of 9/11. I ended up, one of my teachers actually worked at a company that does sort of just different design projects. Nothing like, not one thing, but they do a lot of concerts, like they would do at M&M, people like that, concert stages. And he asked me to join him. So it was basically just sort of 2 people, initially just myself and this other person. And then I brought another classmate of mine. So it was 2 AFI students, and then the person in charge. And we ended up working on, like I said, Ocean's 11. We ended up making this game called Smash Ball, which was sort of like a weird, it's back again. We basically built a whole arena for basketball that had springs in the floorboards, and the whole sport evolved out of that. People like doing flips in the air and stuff. It was very strange. I think what else we did. I art directed the Soul Train Awards, would hang out with Destiny's Child and people like that. So it was kind of a funny thing this time. And then after that, my wife and I, well, my partner at the time, we had a connection to Wim Wenders, who was going to do a movie in LA. So we interviewed for that, and they literally just hired a designer. So we said we art direct, and we ended up doing a movie called I Know Plenty with Michelle Williams. And then the next year we did Don't Come Knocking, which was kind of not a sequel, but sort of a kind of a sequel to Paris, Texas. Sam Shepard wrote it. And
I just saw that movie a couple of weeks ago on Criterion. Yeah, right on.
Film, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which was actually the other thing, because growing up, I loved Paris, Texas. strangely. And then I ended up being, I worked with them, vendors, which was amazing.
Got goosebumps. That's cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
And then past that, just different, just trying to stay afloat. You know, that's the thing. You sort of end up kind of without any sort of guidance. You know, you're kind of just sort of left alone. You know, some people end up in companies. Like if you're a concept artist, you can go to a company and just stay there, and you travel around to the company. But as a designer art director, you're just sort of, you know, looking for the next gig. You know, I have an agent and such, but for the most part, it's just really just making connections and just looking for the next gig, which, you know, I had many years of just kind of floating, and now I've sort of got to the point where I just get calls, usually in the nick of time, and kind of go between projects. But yeah, it took a lot of time just to kind of get enough connections and get your name out there enough where that works.
Mm-hmm. Where they're calling you now, where you don't have to go to the watering hole anymore to fish. Like they're bringing it to you now.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, you know, I get to the point where I'll send in resumes and stuff, but I've never to this day gotten a job that way. You know, I could spend like months sending out resumes and stuff, but really it just comes, I get a call, and a lot of times it's by nobody I know. It's just some random person, a producer suggested me or somebody else, and then I'll just send them flying to New York or flying to Louisiana, which is, you know, exciting. You know, yeah, it's about half the time I don't know anybody in the crew. We just somehow land a job.
Looking back, is that something that you wish they would have taught at AFI as well? Is kind of like, how do you get work? Because you understand how to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because at AFI, that was one that I kept saying is they really ought to have like our center has a place as a thing where they have a you know, kind of a portfolio review at the end of their time, and then they bring in people they want to bring in. You know, the students would say, I want to bring in somebody from Paramount. They bring people in, and they all show their portfolios, which I always thought was a good idea. I think now AFI has a lot more connections. Like on the Star Wars show I was on, there was a few people from AFI, and a lot of, I think it's much easier, not easier, I should say, but there's a lot more of a connection between the outside world and school. When I was there, my teacher got me that one job, but other than that, it wasn't really, you were just kind of on your own, I felt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we could have really got taught that so much. Maybe. I mean, I think honestly, the one thing we weren't taught was money. That's like the one thing at the time. I think it may be different now, but so much of the work is about management of money, and that's something that we weren't really taught. I mean, you learn on the job, I suppose. You learn with cycle projects, but it's different if you have $1,000 versus, you know, $1 million. Yeah, it's a little different. That's something I think that at the time, now it may be different.
Mm-hmm. Like how to cost out projects and budget.
Yes, yes. And I've been back, I've taught a little AFI, and it seems like there's a more of that stuff than before. When I was there, it was very conceptual. And Bob Boyle, who was an amazing designer, our professor, he was very much in the story, which was great. And I'm glad I had that. But at some point, it's nice to have also the practical side.
Spoke about connecting on Michael Jackson's film.
Yeah, the Michael Jackson thing. That was, again, just a random. I was an art director on that, and a designer I work with sometimes, he got this random call, and it was like, do you want to work with Michael Jackson? Like, yeah, sure. So they called me up, and it was like, okay, you know, I hadn't even thought about Michael Jackson for a long time, and suddenly this thing, I'm like, okay, sure. And it turned out to be really fun. I mean, I just honestly didn't think much of it at the time, but yeah, we just it was going to be his big tour. He basically was going to do, I think, was it a year? I think it was a year of shows at the O2 concert hall in London. Mm-hmm. And so the way it worked is, you know, the huge stage, and then he was going to have the largest film screen in the world behind him, kind of wrapped around. And so we shot 3D movies for a bunch of songs, almost like updated music videos, that they were 3D, like Avatar just came out. We're using the Avatar equipment. And so we shot, like for Thriller, you know, we built a whole huge cemetery and a haunted house. And then they had, you know, all this crew, all his band, and a lot of the performers were all in amazing costumes. It was really super cool. Yeah, we had a bunch of sets, and it was all shot 3D. I mean, if you watch the movie, you'll see a little bit of in there,
Mhm.
and then if you watch the Blu-ray, you actually see the whole, a lot of the actual videos.
Mhm.
But it would have been super exciting. Like for Thriller, it starts in this haunted house, and it goes out, and then all these zombies come out of the ground, and then at the very end of this thing is a giant spider comes out, and then on stage, that spider would have appeared in real, and he would have came out of the spider, like the spider's mouth. But yeah, it was super cool. It was just kind of funny to see him every day, and he was very nice. And it was just kind of, we were shooting at Paramount, not Paramount. We were shooting in Culver City, and you'd see people, try to break in all the time, and the security would just throw them over the gate, and you'd be like, "I love you." You'd see kind of like waving at people. He was super nice.
That's so fascinating, man. Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
William.
Yeah, it ended not so nice, but it was
Yeah.
a fun time. It was interesting.
Yeah, that's a totally different story. I remember where it was when that happened.
I got invited to the, whatever we call it, the memorial, which was
Oh,
very
wow.
strange.
Yeah,
Downtown Staples Center. Took the bus downtown just because it was so crowded. It was strangely moving.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was really interesting. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And what a privilege. That's awesome. That's such a cool story. And thanks for sharing that. And is there any other stories that you have throughout your career or any lessons that you learned that you wish to share with the audience?
Um, like I said, I'm just happy to have worked on a Star Wars show. That should come out next year, because that was like literally what I started with Star Wars. So I ended up doing something that's going to be a little different, but it's Star Wars, and again, it's kind of a full circle thing, which I find very nice. Um, I don't know any stories at the top of my head. I'm just thinking. I mean, there's always crazy stories, but as far as I don't know, it's just been like I was just literally in Australia, so not only was it working on a show, I got to swim in the Great Barrier Reef and go through jungles.
Yeah.
Designed a film in Costa Rica, and I got to unknowingly swim with sharks and crocodiles, and there's always something. That's the one thing with the film. It's always crazy. That's one thing I do say. You have to enjoy the craziness, because if you don't, it's gonna be miserable. Because it's just always, it's not just the time and not just the pressure. There's a sandstorm suddenly, or I'm literally swimming with a crocodile. Not, there's like stuff like that. It's in New Orleans, there'd be snakes and alligators looking at me all the time. And yeah, it's just people compare it to war. I don't compare it to war, but there's a level of excitement that I don't know if you have in other jobs, and I think you have to really enjoy that, because it'll drive you mad otherwise. It drives me mad anyway. But
and that's so beautiful that it's full circle for you, because you did mention starting off with Star Wars and being able to work on that. That's epic. Wow.
Yeah, I never thought, because I mean, when I was a child, there was no other shows, there wasn't any other movies, so it's kind of weird that came back. It was really, really cool.
And that you're on it. I mean, that's amazing.
In fact, at AFI, a couple of the screenwriters and we stayed up all night and managed Chinese, so we ended up going to the opening of Phantom Menace.
Oh, right on. Cool.
Well, second showing. First showing, people waited months for. We only waited one night, so we got.
You guys couldn't do that with all those cycles you were doing.
No. And Hollywood awesome. was pretty bad back then.
Yeah, probably not. You don't want to hang out around that area that late at night. No. Thank you so much for taking the time, William, talking with us about your story. Yeah, it's so great to hear somebody from back in AFI just doing so well, and beautiful story with you and your wife.
Thank you.